So we're picking up at the point where I just had some mango salsa. I had some tangerines. Were those tangerines? Were they mandarins? I had an apple. There's a pizza waiting for me downstairs. Some salad. Well, it's lettuce right now. And you obviously got to turn it into a salad. There's hummus. There's flatbreads. I can make a smoothie. I'm sitting here and I have my podcast page is open to what is considered expensive. Well, the other day I was working on a farm. The farmer says, "Yeah, all those homes they've already been sold. Someone's gonna live in those." And then someone else said that in Orange County they just keep building and building and building, more and more people. And then I told the guy that the houses were expensive. My entire life, I was like, expensive essentially goes to imply a lot of money. But I looked up the etymology for expensive, and it kind of more so means like it considers thought. It takes thought. And so I kind of changed my mind about it because I realized, like for example, this whole thing about I was looking at flights to go to Spain, and I guess in an older school of thought, technically, when someone says that a flight is $10,000 one way, some people are going to say that that's expensive. But if you think about it in the sense of like, oh wait, you know what? Actually, tell me about that $10,000 flight, right? And then I start explaining to you like, okay, well, first you get to sleep on the plane while laying down, and then someone says, well, why would you want to do that? And then the answer would be, well, imagine sleeping on a plane as if you're in a classroom in a chair. And some people, they just kind of, they don't think about it that way because they would rather save money taking a flight where they're sleeping vertically as opposed to horizontally. Because then the other aspect to that is that, and this is I would say a subjectively objective thing. Is there a chance you get treated maybe a little bit differently in business class than you would in other class or first class, or maybe you take a private jet? And I mean, the answer is yes, right? So if by definition there's more thought that goes into sitting there and realizing like, oh yeah, I don't have to listen to the fact that I don't know what movie to watch. I can sit there and be curious about the movie I'm going to watch and be looking forward to watching Tenet or another Christopher Nolan movie. Because this lady, she's offering me champagne, and I'm going to say no because I'd rather not have champagne. And so the version of expensive is also like, oh yeah, here in Orange County they keep building up all these homes, and then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, in a very logical sense, a lot of Orange County is master planned to the extent that there's freeways everywhere, there's parks everywhere. If there's new home development, that would also imply that they take a lot of time thinking about essentially making as much money as they can by spending as least amount of money as they can by having as many outside people move inside this bubble as possible. Because they've also catered these people as if it was a resort to the extent that there are resort style amenities and that the shopping feels like you're in vacation mode. So it kind of baffled me because this whole expensive thing was like, a lot of it is just more, you take more thought into it. For example, like, people are like, oh, that house is expensive. Okay, well, how much is the house? $5 million. Well, okay, maybe that guy makes $100 million a year. Is that really expensive? Because I'm sure that person probably, I mean, they have a $5 million house. What are the chances that they had some say in what went in the house? Right? They put their time and their attention, their energy into choosing what the floors look like, what the color of the walls are, where the mirrors go, how big they are, right? And the other interesting thing is like, I'm sitting here saying all these things, and then now I'm gonna go on the other side and be like, okay, well, someone rents an apartment. Do they have time to take thought into what they would want in their house? Maybe they do. Maybe they have such a cozy little apartment. Maybe it's not even a little apartment. Maybe it's a big old apartment, like, and imagine a penthouse apartment, New York, right? Because I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm right, or I'm gonna sit here and say that what I'm saying is better than what you're thinking about. But what I am saying is that the people that live in the middle of Kansas and they got 100-acre farm and they lasso horses and they they have livestock and they have crops and four-wheelers and side by sides and trucks, and bows and arrows and machines. It's like, well, let's be honest here. I'm sure that the farmer is happy to be paying for the oil changes, and he's happy to be paying the mechanic to come over and service his goods because he took time to put those things into his life, and he was like, yeah, you know what, this farm is worth having, and so are those expenses. And so when I found out that it was like pensive, like thinking, I was like, wait a second. It's actually kind of true because anytime I walked into a designer store, I'd always have the moment to think about, like, wait, first off, there's tiers to this. There's different designer stores. But let's just talk about the ones that again are the most expensive. And it's like, okay, well, what makes that store more expensive than the other 99% of all the other stores? And then you realize, like, oh, these people are taking their time and they're considering so many variables that it actually makes sense why they're doing that. Because, and like, this is the kind of interesting thing about all this, is that the relative time could objectively be the same between two designer brands, and then the price point could objectively be completely different by a factor of 10, if not 100. And so that's the interesting thing, is like, what makes something expensive? What makes something, a little bit more worth my money or worth your money? Like, what makes it more expensive? I I'm not thinking about this because I wrote it down who knows when, but now being in the mindset to talk about it, I'm sitting here saying that it has everything to do with whether it, it's something you resonate with. Because the whole version of expensive is now like a very subjective thing at this point. But subjective to the point. You guys can hear that? Wow. So it's subjective to the point that, like, and I'm so honored that I've been in these situations before, because it's like there's people that'll literally think that one store is somehow more expensive, or that one certain shirt or hoodie is more expensive. And objectively, there was an amount of thought that went into it, but when I think about what's considered expensive, it's time and time again, it's become my time, my attention, and my energy. Because I've spent more time recently in my life just renegotiating the simplest of thoughts in my own head. Because when I found out that I was suffering much more in my own brain than I was in the physical world, it completely shifted my focus in life. Completely shifted my focus. And it's so interesting for me to think about it this way because I've refocused my attention and my energy has, like, I have a completely different energy about myself. So this body that we all have, or that you have, that I have, it's really all you have. It really is. That and the thoughts you choose to believe that are true. That's really all you have. And what fascinates me is that I'm sitting here thinking, if something is considered expensive, who considers it expensive and why? In my life, I remember I would wear a particular shirt that was a particular price, but because people considered a designer in it, and the average price for something of that designer was a particular price point, it implied that people who were wearing it could afford it and that they were rich and powerful. And then something happened today where I was like, you know what? That's one of the more fascinating things I've been able to realize, because in cameras, for example, someone was telling me today that they were experiencing a kind of revelation where they realized that if they had a particular camera setup, a particular set of photos would have been captured. And the fascinating thing about all this is, like, I have come to experience that within myself, where it's like I'm sitting here in my room and I'm like, yeah, with this and that camera setup and this and that computer setup, X, Y, and Z thing is gonna happen. like it's gonna be at that magnitude or that level. And like to an extent, like that is very much something that if you can hold yourself off to it and you know that that's max level 10, you might as well have more experience at max level 10. Because if objectively the gear and the quality and all this other metric stuff is significantly better to the point where by removing all the rails you can have more of the experience, well then objectively, just be patient, wait it out. But then I realized, like, you know what, for whatever reason some people have access to it all, they have everything, and they feel like they're doing their best, and that's good. But then there's people who have everything and then they don't do anything with it. And then there's people that don't have anything and they do everything with it. And then the fascinating part about all this is that it's like you give a baby an iPhone camera and then a $50,000 camera. Which photo is going to come out better? And this is obviously a trick question because it doesn't matter whether the photo was expensive. It didn't matter whether the photo was taken with a pricey camera. What always mattered was, did the person witness something that made sense to them? And did they wholeheartedly take a journey to capture that moment? Because you can't get paid to do that part. That's the part that having the camera, that's like the whole point. I mean, I'm not saying that there's a one point to having a camera, but what I am saying is that that journey and that feeling and that resonant thing is like that's it's different for everyone, but that's kind of, you know, it's where the story happens. And so when I think of, what makes something expensive, it's like, well, that's also kind of asking the question of like, what's more worth it? And at this point in my life, it's like almost expensive. Do you know how expensive it is? This is just like wordplay, but do you know how expensive it is to waste your time? Having done or made a decision where you're like, I don't want to do this, and then having the ability, like you choose to go do it anyways, and then you're sitting there with the feeling of like, no, I don't want to be here. Can't get this time back. And it's to me, it's so fascinating because it's like there's also people who know exactly what they want to do, how they're gonna do it, and they just don't think like that. They don't doubt themselves. They're sitting there asking for a refund. Because in this whole same topic of discussion, there's gonna be people who are like, "Oh, I love paying my taxes. It's like an honor to pay my taxes." Do you know why I get to pay so much in taxes? And then they like point to their yacht. It's like it's so remarkable, this world we live in. You're listening to a guy go on for 20 minutes about what it's like having or considering the notion of something that is expensive. Because we're asking ourselves right now, what makes something expensive? And I guess if there were to be an answer from August, what makes something expensive? Okay. Something is made to be expensive when someone fishes for the value for you. And then you choose to believe the words that they say. When you choose to believe that their algorithm or their systems, that however they got to that price point, or however they got to that number, is like the exact way that they decide how something is expensive. Because similarly, you could also be sitting here saying, hey, I fish for myself. You can either choose to go buy the $3 avocado, or you could choose to complain that you bought the $3 avocado. Which one's it going to be? Like I said, we live in a fascinating world. That is episode 3 of season 2. This is the 22nd day of March in the 25th year that they tell us. The next episode that follows this is what is considered necessary. Take care. All the best.